Some of the biggest mistakes you will ever make will not come from what you did, they will come from what you said. One sentence, one careless moment, one emotional impulse. That is all it takes to weaken a friendship, lose a valuable opportunity, or create a regret that quietly follows you for years. But what if the strongest response is not speaking at all? What if real confidence is found in the moments when you choose silence over reaction? Today, you will hear the story of a young man who discovered that silence is not a sign of weakness. It is a quiet kind of strength that changes the way you think, the way you speak, and even the direction of your life. And while you enjoy this inspiring story, you will naturally improve your English listening skills. Meet James. James was an energetic young man who worked in a busy office in the middle of a large city. He was intelligent, hardworking, and full of ideas, but he carried one belief that quietly shaped every conversation he had. James believed that if he wanted people to notice him, respect him, and remember him, he always had to be the first person to speak. During meetings, his hand was usually the first to rise. When friends shared stories, he often jumped in before they had finished. Moments of silence made him uncomfortable. To James, silence felt awkward. He believed that quiet people had nothing important to say, so he filled every pause with words, never realizing that he was leaving very little room to truly listen. One bright Tuesday afternoon, the team gathered for an important meeting about a project that had started falling behind schedule. The room felt tense. Papers covered the table. Coffee cups sat untouched. Everyone knew difficult decisions had to be made. James looked around the room. His manager had not spoken yet. This felt like his chance to prove himself. Before anyone else could begin, James leaned forward and started talking. He pointed out mistakes, questioned decisions, and quickly placed the blame on his teammate Maya. She opened her notebook, trying to explain what had really happened. "James, there is something you should know," she said quietly, but he never let her finish. Certain that he was helping, James spoke faster. His words became sharper. Every sentence was meant to make his own ideas sound stronger. Slowly, the room grew silent, not because everyone agreed, but because no one wanted to interrupt. Maya slowly closed her notebook. She lowered her eyes and looked at the table. She did not argue anymore. Somehow, her silence spoke louder than everything James had just said. When the meeting finally ended, nobody congratulated James. Nobody thanked him. People quietly gathered their papers and walked out of the room. The atmosphere felt strangely cold. A few minutes later, his manager asked him to step inside the office. James expected praise. Instead, his manager looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Your ideas were good," he said calmly. "But today, people remembered your words, not your ideas." James remained silent. "You were so busy trying to be heard that you stopped listening. Trust is much harder to rebuild than a project plan." Those words stayed with James far longer than the meeting itself. As he walked out of the office, a heavy feeling settled inside him. He replayed every moment in his mind. He had wanted to solve a problem, but somehow he had become part of it. As James began searching for answers, take a moment to think about your own life. Have you ever spoken too quickly and wished you could take your words back? Sometimes a few seconds of patience can prevent years of regret. Here on English Growth Stories, we learn English through meaningful stories that stay with us long after the video ends. If you enjoy improving your English this way, consider subscribing and joining our growing community of learners from around the world. Now, let us continue James's journey. That evening, instead of taking the usual crowded streets home, James wandered into a peaceful public garden near his neighborhood. He was not looking for anyone. He simply wanted a quiet place where his thoughts could slow down. The city noise gradually faded behind him. Birds sang softly from the trees. Leaves moved gently in the afternoon breeze. For the first time that day, James said nothing. As he followed a narrow stone path, he noticed an elderly gardener carefully planting a young tree. His movements were slow and unhurried, as if time itself had decided to slow down beside him. His silver hair reflected the evening sunlight, and there was a quiet kindness in his face. James stopped without saying a word. The old man smiled gently but kept working. After a few moments, without even looking up, he asked, "You have been carrying something heavy all day, haven't you?" James looked surprised. "How did you know?" The gardener chuckled softly. "People who carry peace look at flowers," he replied. "People who carry worries never stop looking at the ground." For the first time all day, James smiled. He sat down on a nearby wooden bench and slowly shared everything. He spoke about the meeting, about Maya, about the disappointment in his manager's voice, and about the fear that if he ever stayed silent, people would simply forget he existed. The old gardener listened without interrupting even once. When James finally finished speaking, the man carefully placed his gardening tools on the ground, brushed the soil from his hands, and walked toward a giant oak tree standing nearby. He gently rested one hand on its rough trunk. "Do you know how old this tree is?" he asked. James shook his head. "Nearly 50 years. The old man looked up into its wide branches. "For 50 years it grew stronger every single day." Then he smiled. "And yet, you never heard it grow." The old gardener looked at James and said softly, "The strongest things in life rarely make noise. This tree never rushed to prove how strong it was. While storms came and seasons changed, it simply kept growing, quietly." James followed the old man's eyes toward the wide branches stretching across the sky. The gardener picked up a small handful of soil and let it slowly fall through his fingers. "People admire the tree because of what they can see," he continued, "but everything that keeps it standing is hidden underground. Strong roots grow in silence." James stood there without speaking. Somehow, those simple words felt heavier than every speech he had given at work. After a long pause, the old gardener smiled and said, "Silence is not empty, James. It is where clear thoughts are born. When your mind is full of noise, you react. But when your mind is quiet, you respond." James lowered his head, thinking about the meeting again. He remembered interrupting Maya. He remembered his manager's disappointed face. For the first time, he realized that his biggest mistake was not speaking harshly. It was refusing to listen. Before James left, the old gardener offered one final piece of advice. "The next time you feel the need to speak immediately," he said, "don't count to 3 first." James looked curious. The gardener raised 3 fingers. "Then ask yourself 3 simple questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?" He smiled warmly. "If even one answer is no, let silence do the talking." James nodded slowly. Those 3 questions seemed almost too simple. But somehow, they felt exactly like the lesson he had been searching for. The very next morning, life gave James a chance to practice. During a discussion at work, a coworker made an expensive mistake and quickly blamed James in front of everyone. A few days earlier, James would have defended himself before anyone else could speak. His heart still wanted to react. His lips even started to move. Then he remembered the old oak tree. 1, 2, 3. He took a slow breath and stayed silent. The room became unusually quiet. That brief silence changed everything. The co-worker's voice became softer. The tension slowly disappeared. People stopped arguing and started thinking. Only after everyone had finished speaking did James calmly say, "Let's look at what actually happened before we blame anyone." His voice was steady. There was no anger, no sarcasm, no need to prove himself. Together, the team reviewed the problem and quickly discovered that it had been caused by a misunderstanding, not by any one person. Maya looked across the table and smiled gently. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was something much smaller and somehow much more meaningful. For the first time, James felt respected without fighting for attention. Over the following weeks, James practiced the habit every single day. He listened before answering. He asked more questions than he gave opinions. He stopped trying to fill every quiet moment with unnecessary words. Something surprising began to happen. People listened more carefully whenever he spoke. Friends opened up to him more easily. Meetings became calmer. Even stressful situations seemed easier to handle. James realized that confidence did not come from speaking the most. It came from knowing when his words truly mattered. One evening, as he walked home through the same peaceful garden, James passed the old oak tree once again. He stood beneath its wide branches and smiled. The city around him was just as busy as it had always been. Cars still rushed past. People still hurried through their lives. Nothing around him had changed, but something inside him had. For the first time in years, silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. It felt like a place where his mind could finally breathe. James discovered a lesson that many people spend their whole lives learning. Silence is not weakness. It is self-control. It gives us the space to understand before judging, to listen before reacting, and to choose our words with care instead of emotion. Sometimes the wisest thing you can say is nothing at all. So the next time you feel angry, impatient, or eager to prove yourself, remember the quiet oak tree. Pause for just a few seconds. Count to 3. Ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? You may be surprised by how often silence gives you a better answer than words ever could. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever said something that you wished you could take back? Or has someone's silence ever taught you an important lesson? Share your experience in the comments below. Writing about your thoughts is also a wonderful way to practice your English with learners from around the world. If you enjoyed today's story and learned something valuable, please like this video and subscribe to English Growth Stories for more inspiring stories that help you improve your English naturally. Thank you for spending these few minutes with us. Until our next story, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, not every powerful voice needs to be heard. Sometimes silence says everything.